welcome to the MyCom Podcast. This is a podcast all about church marketing and church communications. I'm John Watson, and I'm here with our co-host, Darby Jones.
Hi there.
And today, our guest is Joe Iovino.
Hi.
What's up, Joe? Welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
So Joe is the host of a UMC podcast called Get Your Spirit in Shape. How long has that been around now?
About a year and a half.
Year and a half. That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about this thing. Like, what was the genesis of this podcast?
The genesis was I was having phone interviews. I write for UMC.org and is my primary role. And I was having phone conversations with people around the church that were just fascinating conversations that I wanted to share with people. So I would have an hour-long conversation with somebody and then write a 1,000-word story that used about 5 minutes of that conversation. And they were just fun, things I wanted people to be introduced to or... and then we just had an opportunity to talk to a couple of authors. We had an opportunity to get with some leaders, and we just decided to start a podcast.
That's awesome. Sound like really organic.
There was some talk around the office that we wanted to do something. We knew this medium was growing, and actually we're probably a little bit behind the curve here. But then here was the opportunity for what we could do, and we just took it, and it was pretty organic, just figuring it out as we go.
That's awesome. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit behind the curve as long as we catch up eventually,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
We're here at United Methodist Communications, and part of what we do is just tapping into the communication channels and methods that you might want to use in your churches and experimenting and getting good at them and practicing and playing and having fun and identifying how they can be of benefit to you or not. So we've been as an agency, I guess, been in the podcasting game, I guess, since your start. I think yours was the first, right?
First regular one, yeah.
The first regular podcast, followed by this MyCom Podcast, I believe. And it's been fun.
It is a lot of fun. For me, I get to meet a lot of people. It's been great to have the conversations that I'm getting to have. And I'm excited right now because we're going to be starting, it's once a month. We're going to be going into twice a month, where one of them, at least for the fall, we're going to be interviewing a bishop. And I've been getting to talk to some of our bishops, and not about their jobs, but about who they are as people, about their call to ministry, and then just, what do you like to do? What do you do to relax? What do you do for fun? It's been great.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I play a little bit of guitar. This is so nerdy, but I write a lot. I process a lot of things through writing, but that's what I do. I read, and my guilty pleasure is I like to go to the movies, and I'm a television viewer, which I know sounds low class all the time, but I'm pretty regular on television.
That's great. So, okay, favorite book that you've read in the last 6 months?
Right now I'm reading Eugene Peterson's Eat This Book, which is just this devotional, how to read the Bible more devotionally. Yeah. I am thoroughly enjoying that. I read Wesley more than the normal person probably does. Those are probably a couple of the things that I would go to.
That's awesome.
Right away. I don't read fiction, unfortunately. That would be way far more interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about the Eugene Peterson book. It's been on my list for a while.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
I had a job some time ago, several years back, where I got to interview a lot of theologians and professors and authors, and we'd have in people like Ben Witherington and David De Silva and talk with these guys, and I would ask them about their recent reading habits, expecting, these magnum opus academic magisterial works, and I'd get things like silly British murder mysteries and John Grisham novels, and it was actually quite fun just to find like, oh yeah, these aren't like ivory tower, wizards in the robes with, like these are people who enjoy these fun things.
I went through a period several years ago where I read Earl Stanley Gardner, who wrote the Perry Mason novels. I read a bunch of the Perry Mason novels.
That's awesome.
And Sherlock Holmes. I used to love Sherlock Holmes. So I just went through a period where...
As a John Watson, I have a penchant for Sherlock Holmes, let me tell you.
Yeah, so that they're more the kind of the fun stuff, but it's been a while since I've read just for the fun of it.
So going back to the Get Your Spirit in Shape, do you have a favorite episode?
There's several that come to mind. One of the very first ones we did, actually I think the first one we recorded but actually released as episode 2, was about doing family worship, and it was with Karen Oliver and Jenny Armstrong, who were authors who had each written books about how to do kind of family worship. And we just had this wonderful conversation that was fun and light,
Yeah.
and it was just this really good,
Oh, that's awesome.
really good conversation.
Super needed too.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was,
that
it was
topic
really
has been
good.
so neglected for like 200 years.
And they gave great ideas. Some of them
Yeah.
really simple, and some a little more, would take a little more time and a little more dedication and work, but they were great. And it was just a great conversation. And since then, I've had opportunity to interview people like Mike McHarg, who is known as Science Mike in the podcasting world.
Yeah.
Jason Michelli, who wrote a book called Cancer is Funny, which I would highly recommend. It's a very good book and great theology, and it really, he's funny, so
That's
it's fun to
awesome.
read
Yeah.
as well. And then I was able to do one recently with the people who made our, kind of an insider thing, but the people who made our campaign with the children. I think it's called Their Words, Our Beliefs, or we asked kids,
Right.
and probably seen some of the commercials in Rethink Church, some of the ads that are on the web and other places. And I interviewed Jacob Armstrong, who's the pastor locally who asked the kids the questions,
Right.
and Jennifer Rodia, who I work with, who's actually my supervisor here. And we did one and she was in charge of kind of the whole campaign and putting it together. And that was a really fun conversation. I like when you can hear a lot of laughter in our podcast.
Yeah.
And those episodes are a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
those are ones with lots of laughter.
That's awesome.
Do you remember some of the parts of the bringing back family worship that you thought were particularly interesting?
A couple of things I remember were how Jenny and her family found that mornings were the best time because that was the one time they were together. There wasn't a kid at
Right.
soccer practice. There wasn't band or whatever else was going on. And so they decided to get up a little bit early, and Jenny, the mom, said she would make breakfast every day. And so not only did they have devotion time, but they had a sit-down breakfast kind of every morning to be able to do that. And then the other author talked about how she at times caught her child repeating things that had been done without really knowledge that this was part of what was done in devotions, but it just
Right.
kind of came up days later
Right.
as if it was their own. It was just embedded in their thinking and
Yeah.
in their spirit, and just that it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was just really beautiful.
We have just this morning, we drove my wife's cousin back to the airport. She was staying with us for the last week, and she's from Kansas, and she taught my 4-year-old the song where the only words are Pizza Hut, a Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and a Pizza Hut, McDonald's. You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
It's all he does now is go
Right.
around singing this little ditty. And it was just such a good reminder that our children are, as kind of microcosms of grown-ups, also we are catechizable by everything around us.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes family worship so important. Like, what songs are we giving our family?
Right.
What prayers are we giving our family? What can we feed them spiritually to get their spirit in shape?
Absolutely.
You see what I did there? Full circle. Full circle. Yeah.
Can I talk a little bit about that? So the metaphor
Yeah.
that we talk about with get your spirit in shape is that we like to offer people things to think about, which we call the spiritual nutrition. And then we try every episode to give a spiritual exercise or something that you can do to help to keep your spirit in shape. And I ask every guest for a recommendation of something that they do that they would like to share, that they would recommend other people try. And I've gotten everything from spiritual practices you would think of like centering prayer and things along that line. And then there are others who talk about, one of my spiritual practices is listening to my children, or one of my spiritual practices is making sure I stay in connection with friends that have been important to me and have supported me. So some of it's what you would think, and some of it's a little out of the box, and it's just great. And I hope people
That's
are
awesome.
trying those things because
Yeah.
I think there's real benefit to it. Some of the examples I gave you were a little more heady, but we've also talked to an author about parenting or very practical tips of things ways to live out your spirituality. My audience is mostly members, not leaders in the church. And so my goal is to improve people's discipleship so that it's not just a Sunday thing or it's not just a Wednesday thing,
Right.
but it's something that people are living out in every aspect of their lives. And I assume maybe because it's the way I've lived my life for a long time, but we compartmentalize those things. There's kind of this religious side of me, and then there's the everyday side of me. And one of my goals is to erase those lines, and so that it all
Right.
kind of flows together, and that we begin to see God and our spirituality and everything that we're doing, from parenting to
Yeah.
grocery
That's huge.
shopping or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Is it Psalm 46? Well, I think it's Psalm 46 or 49 where David says, "Unite my heart to fear your name." I think the implicit idea is that we are disunited in our very being, right? Our intellect is going one way, our will's going another, our emotions are going another. And David's like, I want you to bring all of this together
Yeah.
to worship God. And that it just speaks to that every element of our life is touched by the gospel. Every element of our life is touched by grace. But if we're just doing our Sunday morning thing, we're missing out on so much grace there. That's huge. Yeah. And part of the communications tie-in here, like the reason why we've got Joe here, listener, is because he's giving you content that you can communicate to your church, to your community, to the world through your methods. If you've ever sat down to write a blog or Facebook post and stopped and gone, oh man, what do I say? I got nothing to say. That's the point of, that's one way that we can interact with Get Your Spirit in Shape or UMC.org or all of these resources, right? Is feed yourself so that you can feed other people, right? And you can have that kind of flow of what to say there.
Yeah.
So anyway, we benefit greatly from that. And, as marketers, if you're new to the communications game, this will come. It's a marketing and communications pair of glasses that you put on where, if you're a preacher, you'll know this. Everything is illustration material, right?
Right.
Everything in life that you come across, every story, every news article is a potential sermon illustration. For the marketer, it's the same sort of thing. Everything that you see, you put on these glasses and look through the lens of communications, and everything becomes helpful in how you shape your message and what the message is to your people. Anyway, I don't know how to segue out of that, so we're just going to move to the next thing. So this is what you're doing right now, is this Get Your Spirit in Shape podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your training, your passions?
Yeah. Before coming to United Methodist Communications, I spent more than 20 years in pastoral ministry and in 3 churches, which is a little bit unique in the United Methodist Church. I'm an ordained deacon in Full Connection. For those who know United Methodist speak, you'll know what that means. But I served 2 small churches as the lead pastor in Southern New Jersey, another church in New Jersey as their youth and eventually their worship pastor. And then I moved to Colorado and served a church there as their youth and worship pastor. So I spent some time mostly in youth ministry, and then started, as I got older, began to move into worship ministry. I play guitar, so I did some song leading, and then I developed into, again, I seem to do a lot of things this way where I just kind of learn as I go, and then kind of developed into being the one who brought the first contemporary worship service into 2 of these congregations, and audio video too. So I was part of that. I was the slide creator in my last congregation, where every Sunday, and they hadn't had slides before I got, we didn't use video before I got there. So went through that transition and introduction, which is not always easy. If anybody's been through that, you know how hard that can be. And so that's been my background and kind of my journey into United Methodist Communications. Along the way, I was always a writer. Didn't always recognize that early on, but I did youth newsletters, and eventually those were youth emails. And one of the things I wanted to do is always have the kids open them. And so I did 2 things. One was usually include a short, goofy video, and the other was write something devotional. Yeah. And the devotional pieces was really funny, as I had parents coming to me and asking more and more about the devotions I was writing. They were reading the devotions, the kids weren't, which is typical of youth newsletters. I think parents read them more than the kids do. But then soon a senior pastor picked up on that and said, what if we did devotions kind of every day and provided it for the congregation? That became part of my job, is writing daily devotions. So I was writing 6 a week. And that really, we'll talk about honing your writing skills. Just write that much and trying to keep them to about 200 words. Oh, my goodness. There are any short little devotions that were really...
Give me 2,000 words and I'll be fine. Give me 200 words. I'm going to be sweating.
But I think was it Mark Twain that said, I'm sorry, this letter was long. I didn't have time to make it shorter.
Yeah.
And there is some truth to that, right? It takes a lot of work to get things short.
It really does.
And then I just kind of honed those gifts and eventually saw that as my... next phase of ministry was this writing ministry and doing those things. And so that's what I get to do now. And it's a blast. I mean, I get to research things, which I love. I get to talk to people. I meet people who have a variety of backgrounds. And then I get to tell whoever reads it the story of what's going on. And it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. I mean, what's cool about that to me is when you talk about church life and communications and marketing, they can seem really separated and compartmentalized. But I mean, just hearing your background for a minute there shows that it's a really organic marriage. Mm-hmm. It's really natural, and that the communications, just tactics that you used, benefited your church ministry. It sounds like pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
And so that's such a good example of what we're all about here. Is not splitting out and having this little marketing world and then this church world, but showing that good communication and careful communication matters in all the aspects of our life, and particularly as it comes to bear on the church.
And so I still do some of that, and that's might be useful to congregations. It's not daily devotions anymore, but we do write devotional materials that appear on umc.org that are free for churches to use in their newsletters, however they want to put them on their website. And you may not have someone who can write all of those things that you would like to write, or senior pastors a lot of times would love to do that and don't have time to do that.
Right.
And so there's some material here that you can borrow.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about that. So United Methodist Communications as an agency, we run UMC.org essentially.
Correct.
Right? So tell us a little bit about UMC.org and what it kind of has to offer the church. What's the point? What do we bring to the table?
Yeah, UMC.org, our primary audience is the members of the church, or those who are already connected to the church. There's another channel, UMCom, that's more for leaders, and there's Rethink Church that's more for seekers. We are trying to talk to the people kind of in the middle that are involved. But what it has to offer the church, or pastors and leaders in the local church, is, like you said, illustration material. We do stories about interesting things that are happening in the church, just cool ministries. We just did one on a car care ministry where a church decided they had this extra building and guys who were really good at fixing cars, and now they fix cars for free.
Oh, wow.
People just pay
Is
for
this
the
within
parts.
driving distance?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, they're in Georgia, so it's not. Well, a long drive,
that's
but
a long drive.
but you could get there. But there's just some of these just really interesting things that we can lift up that are great ideas for your missions committee or your evangelism committee to take a look at. There's some really good things there that might be ideas of how can we reach out to our community. You might not do a car care ministry, but it might spur some other idea of what talents do we have here that we could use for the community. We have, as I said earlier, some devotional material. Some of that's written, some of it's in video form or photo slideshows that are great to use either on your website or in worship.
Just so everyone who's listening knows how to find these resources, you just go to umc.org, and there's actually a tab at the top called Resources. And Joe writes and curates all these topics to help you illustrate your sermons and find videos to bolster small groups. So what are some of the recent topical pages that you've done related to some of the recent news?
Right now, there are things happening in Sierra Leone, and we have things that talk about what to do in disaster or when life is hard, or what do we do when things just don't make sense to us? How do we reach out? There are things about women in leadership in the church. There are things about African Americans, Native Americans. There's all kinds of wonderful aspects of the things that are happening in the United Methodist Church.
So UMC.org, as I hear it, is a way for a local congregation to keep kind of their finger on the pulse of the kind of global UMC church and some of the global challenges that they're facing and the UMC perspective that's brought to bear on those things.
Yeah, and it's one of the ways to show your congregation also the ways in which we are all connected as United Methodists all across the globe, because there are ministries that are happening in Africa and in Europe and in the Philippines and throughout the United States that are just remarkable in the ways that we're reaching out. One of the ones, this is a little bit older, but one of the ones I really had the privilege, I interviewed one of our bishops in Germany probably a year or so ago when the refugee crisis in Europe was becoming what it is today. And talking to the bishop about what was happening in Germany, and the United Methodist Church in Germany is not really big and their congregations aren't very big, but they were welcoming in refugees and doing amazing ministry with those people. And that's part of who we are. I like to say that's, sometimes we say the church does X, but we are the church. And so when we do it, we have done these things to work towards eradicating malaria in Africa. That's part of all of us doing this work together. And so it's just this exciting ministries that happen sometimes in the midst of disaster. We just got news recently about, I don't know when this is going to come out, but we get news recently about mudslides in Sierra Leone and hundreds of people are feared to be, have been killed by this. And the United Methodist Church is there. We are there, and we get to tell those stories. And so if you want news about what the church is doing, there's a portion of the site that says news and media, and you can go to United Methodist News Service and get some news. But maybe what you'll get are some thought theologically about what does it mean to be the church in the world in the midst of these crises? What does it mean to serve our neighbor. And we do it from a unique Wesleyan perspective.
Right.
So we talk about John Wesley and some of our history.
That's amazing. And again, that is so important to kind of keep a toe in that stream, so to speak, so that is something that you're able to offer your community, is not just the beating heart of your local church, but
Right.
of we, the United Methodist Church.
When I was in the local church, one of the things that we tried to communicate quite often was, why do we give some of our money as shared giving or apportionments,
Right.
whatever they call that in your local congregation, that kind of goes to the annual conference, and from the annual conference to the general conference and all of that stuff. Why are we doing those things? And to be able to share, this is what those dollars are doing. This is how we're participating. These are the ways that we are making a difference in the world. And so together, I like to say, together as United Methodists, we can do so much more than any one congregation
Right.
could do. And that's one of the beautiful things. I can hear, I get excited. I get
absolutely.
so excited about the things that the church does on a big scale. It doesn't downplay what's happening in the local churches. We love to tell local church stories
And
about
there's
things
tons
that
of
are
that
happening.
on UMC too.
Yes, there's tons about the ministries in the local church. But when you put all of that together, the witness that we have to the entire world, or the ways that we're reaching out and meeting needs, it's just remarkable.
It really is. The term that keeps coming to mind is Gestalt. That term, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Correct. Yeah.
That, all of these parts alone are great, but when you add them together, there's a kind of a synergy that happens where there's just a thing about it.
Yeah.
The thing.
Yeah.
It's been amazing to see these last couple years, especially as I've been involved with UMCom.
And so when you go to umc.org, you'll get everything from the individual thing you can watch at your desk to what's happening globally and everything in between.
Yeah.
Small group discussion questions are there. There's all kinds of things to draw you in.
Speaking of these questions, United Methodists love their history. Can you talk about some of the quizzes that you guys create?
Yeah, we have created some quizzes. They started, I think it was one Christmas, we started doing an Advent quiz where we asked questions about Advent and Christmas and just kind of gave some basic ideas. And they're fun because you think you know the answers to them, and sometimes you don't, or it's not as certain as what you thought. And so it's just a fun way to kind of get at that. So there's one for Advent and Christmas. There's one for Lent and Easter. And we update them every season, or every year when the season comes around.
Right.
There are history quizzes about the church in the United States, the church in England where it began, the church in the Philippines and Germany, all of those places. So there's lots of things that you can learn, and they're fun. And every once in a while we'll get a request from a church, especially like Advent, Christmas, or Lent, Easter. A small group of people are going to have a party, and they're having their Christmas party. And so they'll ask us for the questions so that they can go over them and have kind of a conversation around these things. So they're fun, but they also have explanations, and we put a lot of links in them so you can go and learn more if you're really interested in whatever the answer was to that question. So it's a great way to learn, and it's really, really accessible.
Right.
That's awesome. If you are part of a marketing or communications team at your church, your mind should be reeling right now, because there's so many different things you could do with these quizzes. You could have some sort of competition. There's one quiz called "Are You Smarter Than a United Methodist?"
Right.
So you could take these questions and create your own game show at church. You could take these individual questions and post them on your Facebook just to get conversation going. So
yeah, they're fun. They really are fun.
So that brings
Some of them are impossible, but they're fun.
That brings us to an awesome thing to kind of close up with, that we offer this stuff at umc.org to you, the church, to actually use. It's not just for your head. It's something that you can engage with. So can you tell us about some of the ways that we might do that, whether it's republishing articles or using videos?
Yeah, we get requests fairly regularly to republish articles either in bulletins or in the newsletters of churches, and we always give permission to do that. We simply ask for an attribution and to let people know it came from umc.org, because we want your church members to know that they can come and be part of umc.org and learn more on their own. One of the things that I think is a really valuable resource that people don't immediately think of is these videos that we produce, and some of the photo slideshows that we produce can be great worship resources, or can be really fun to put on your website to just kind of be an exciting thing. And Like I said earlier, I used to be the slide guy in one of my churches, and I know how expensive a video can be that you're only going to play one time. Well, all of ours are free to download. And so there's a download button there, and you can take them and use them in your worship services or however you see fit to use them in your churches. So they're just a great resource to be used. There's also, under the resources tab that we talked about before, there's a link for photos, and that we have a photo library that you can sign up for and use the photos in your church. And they would be great for, again, newsletter, website, anything that just kind of brings it. And we have world-class photographers.
I was going to mention that. The photographers on staff at UMCom are insanely good.
Yeah.
Insanely good.
Yeah. You want a picture from Africa or from around the corner from where your ministry is, it's there. And it's just they're insanely good.
We have a United Methodist Church assets library where you can go search by keyword. We've tagged all of our photos, thousands and thousands of photos, like Joe said, world-class photos from all over the world. We've tagged them in the last few years, and you can search and use them for your purposes. And if you want to contribute, I believe the way you do that is you get in touch with Katz Berry, K. Berry at umcom.org. That's KBARRY at umcom.org. And you can actually talk to her about contributing to this library.
Yeah. You contributing photos, like your own photos. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, so that really between the asset library, the articles published, the videos, the quizzes, I mean, there's just this is a UMC repository of gold that is handed to you on a little platter to go and benefit your ministry.
Yeah, so, I really hope people will use it. And I hope spend some time. I mean, there's a lot more there than we have time to really talk about, but
it's massive.
Spend some time around there. There's great history. One of the issues I think that's really helpful too is there's a Ask the UMC portion.
Right.
And I don't know, as a pastor, every once in a while you get a question and you think you know the answer to, but maybe you're a little shaky about. There's some resources there to help find some good answers. And then also there's always Infoserv. And if you have a question, there's a link at umc.org for Infoserv, which is they live chat during office hours, or you can email them your question, and it can be anything in the UMC, and we research tons and tons of stuff.
The folks who work at Infoserv are walking filing cabinets.
Absolutely.
They're remarkable.
And they're actually the ones that create the Ask the UMC questions.
Right.
And they try and pull some of the most creative questions that they get over the years.
And popular ones, like if they get a lot of repeat questions about the same thing, so they go in the Ask UMC file too. So it's really fun.
Yeah. And we'll put all the links in the description of this podcast, umc.org/quiz, umc.org/history.
Some of the photos.
The Infoserv, Ask UMC, we'll put all that there so you can dive in.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for being a part of this today, man.
Thank you. This
was
was
great
fun.
having you. And if you haven't listened to Get Your Spirit in Shape, we really commend it to you. You can check that out where, Joe?
It's umc.org/podcasts, plural, podcasts. And Get Your Spirit in Shape is right there at the top of the page.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Go give it a listen, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks.